Welcome to Remote Learners Microsoft Office 365 integration question and answer session. Um, as you know, the Microsoft Office 365 integration is a set of plugins that we have worked with in partnership with Microsoft to create, and we are going to give you a bit of an overview of the integration and what the Smart Start is about. The first 10 or 15 minutes is going to be an overview of the product and the integration, and then we're going to open up to questions and answers, a Q&A session on this plugin and this or the set of plugins and the integration in the Smart Start. As most of you are aware, we are running an opportunity here, a special, where this integration, the Smart Start integration, we are doing at no charge presently for the first 20 clients that are interested. Currently, we have 15 that are interested, so if during or after this presentation you become interested and would like to have the integration, please contact your account executive as soon as possible so we can get you into the list. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Nick McJetters. He is going to go through the presentation. You can see we've got a question screen. Go ahead and type your questions into that screen, but we will be turning on the microphones after the presentation so we can get a conversation and answer some of your questions. So we'll make sure that all questions are answered. So Nick, if you would go ahead and take it away.
All right, thank you, Don. I appreciate that introduction. My name is Nicholas McJetters. I'm an e-learning administrator here at Remote Learner. I'm overseeing some of the Office 365 Smart Starts that we have in progress with a couple of clients. Very eager to meet with you guys today. I understand you guys did have a number of questions fielded. I look forward to being able to answer those, and for those questions I don't have answers to, I'm looking to get get answers to those questions. So today I wanted to go over briefly what exactly the Office integration entails, to kind of give a short overview of what to expect when this integration goes live, and to help you and your organization decide if this is something you'd be interested in pursuing. So far we have had a couple of customers go through the process. I'm happy to say it's a relatively successful integration. Definitely I think that the Office and Moodle working closely together is very beneficial to leverage some of those properties and technologies Microsoft has and bring those into open source Moodle. So I'm very excited to be able to share this with you today. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and get started. So first thing I want to talk about is some use cases of what you'd actually be able to do now when you integrate Moodle and Office together. I want to be able to manage all or some Moodle accounts through an Azure Active Directory. For those Moodle administrators, you've got your Moodle site. Your Moodle site may have manual accounts. Manual accounts in Moodle are accounts that only are authenticated in Moodle. As you know, Moodle's plugin architecture is modular, so we can also extend that to talk to maybe an LDAP server, a CAS server, if you have one available, and other technologies as well. And through using OpenID Connect, we can now have Moodle talk to an Azure Active Directory. So you can mix and match authentication methods. For those Moodle administrators that are familiar, when you go to Browse List of Users and select an authentication method, we would have the new ability to have an OpenID Connect plugin. So using the OpenID Connect plugin, which is included with the Office integration, you'll now have the ability to have a new set of users that are listed in your Azure Active Directory now be able to log into Moodle with those same credentials. In that bullet point I mentioned manage all or some because you may only want some of your accounts to come from Azure, and you may have some accounts you want to stay in Moodle. So using Moodle's plugin architecture, you'll be able to pick and choose where those accounts come from. Typically through the integration, you may start off with manual accounts, and you may want to migrate to those Azure accounts. So we may want to look at some point during the Smart Start migrating off of those Moodle manual accounts and then match those credentials to what your users are already using in Azure for their Office accounts or your campus-wide or organizational single sign-on. Once we have that base layer in, Moodle is able to build that relationship between Moodle and Office via Azure. There's some really cool things we can do after that, like synchronize Moodle calendars with Outlook calendars. For those users that are familiar with Moodle, inside every course there's a calendar. You have you have site-wide calendars, and through the integration as well, a user will be able to pick and choose which calendars they want to subscribe to then show up on their Outlook calendar. So how cool would it be for a user in a course that when a teacher puts in an assignment is due, the assignment opens on Monday, the assignment closes on Friday, how useful or great would that be for your users to then be able to see that on their Outlook calendars? And then once it's on their Outlook calendars, they could extend that to mobile phones, Windows phones, iPhones, so on and so forth. So as soon as that synchronization is set up, when that teacher sets up that feature in Moodle, which then is paired to Moodle's calendar, that information can seamlessly be pushed to an Outlook calendar and then pushed out to those students that way as well for those students that are using those Outlook calendars that are included in their Office subscription. In addition to using the calendar feature, we also add OneDrive for Business support. For those that are familiar with Moodle's repository structure, Moodle also includes a OneDrive, but the OneDrive support for Moodle is more closely related to the OneDrive support that is associated with a Microsoft account. So if a user wants to set up or maybe has their own personal, provided you've turned on the OneDrive support that's included with Moodle as a prerequisite, if a user wanted to be able to tie into their personal OneDrive account, that may be a possibility. But OneDrive for Business, OneDrive for Education that's included actually uses a separate set of technologies which makes it incompatible with that plugin that's built into Moodle Core. So by adding the Office integration to your Moodle as well, that OneDrive repository plugin can then talk to the user's file. Then when the user is navigating Moodle, they'll see their file picker and be able to seamlessly pick files that are already posted in their OneDrive account that's included with your Office 365 subscription. The great cool thing with this is a user no longer maybe has to download that file locally, then upload it back to Moodle. Their Moodle file picker will automatically be able to see anything they've stored in Office as well. So if they want to attach that to an assignment, attach it to a form post, they'd be able to do all of that without having to transfer that file through a local machine, if that were the case. And lastly, one of the more notable features is an integration with OneNote. For those that are familiar with Moodle's assignment plugin, Moodle's assignment plugin is very modular. We typically have submission plugins as well as feedback plugins. With this integration, a special plugin has been written for the Moodle assignment for the submission side that a student would actually be able to create a OneNote, use that as their assignment, and basically be able to send those OneNotes using OneNote Online to that teacher to take a look at. And vice versa, when that teacher wants to send feedback, they too can create a OneNote in their OneNote Online notebook. And then the user or the student will be able to see those notes as a feedback. So this is going to enable a very impressive integration with OneNote, so users can use OneNotes as a type of assignment type. And of course, as you recall, assignment is modular, so it could be a mix of a OneNote assignment, or you could have a plain text assignment, or you could have a typical file submission process as well, if you still want to use that. So let's go ahead and just drill down to some of those features really quickly. But before we do that, I do want to briefly touch on the actual requirements. So before we get started, in order to make all of this great stuff work, we'll need to make sure that your Moodle site is on Moodle 2.7 or higher. The integration won't work with older Moodle versions prior to 2.7. So as long as you're on Moodle 2.7 or higher, you'll be within the requirements range. This also is going to require your organization to have an Office 365 subscription. Typically, these are sold as business, enterprise, or education. So any Office will work with this. And in addition to that, you'll want to make sure you have an Azure Active Directory subscription. This Azure Active Directory subscription may be how you maintain your Office licenses. So basically, you'll be able to issue your Office accounts, manage your Office accounts, so on and so forth to your organization. But we will manage your Moodle accounts through Azure for those accounts that are coming through that OpenID plugin. And during the Smart Start, we'll take a closer look at the Azure account side as well to see if you have any questions there. But I would like to go ahead and take you through some of the features right quick so you can get a better idea visually of what it entails. So this right here is a typical typical Moodle login screen that you may be familiar with. When we enable the OpenID Connect plugin, which will talk to your Azure AD, your users will have a new feature at the bottom of the screen, log into your account using, which will then take you to the next screen, which will be the Office 365 screen. So one authentication procedure is that the user, and I'm going to flip back between these slides, will enter their rather than enter their credentials on the login screen, they'll click the Office 365, then they'll authenticate on the Office 365 side. Azure will give the thumbs up, I know this user, go ahead and let them in, and then the user will go to their front page at that point. We also have an authentication method where they could enter in those Azure credentials directly in the Moodle page, but at the advice of Microsoft, they are recommending that clients actually put their credentials through the Office 365 page or the Azure login page for more security. So we can discuss the implications of either using the login page or the Azure page for implementation-wise to see what's a better fit for your organization. Once the user is logged in, we did talk briefly about the calendar syncing function. So as you can see, we have a sample Moodle calendar up, or we have a sample Office 365 calendar up. And inside this calendar, anytime something's added to a course calendar, a site calendar, maybe we are having Moodle maintenance. So maybe we might want to add that Moodle maintenance rather than an announcement to the site calendar. So then if your users are subscribed to that site-wide calendar, your users will then see that maintenance window show up on their calendar so they know Moodle will be unavailable. So that's another great implementation of how that calendar syncing for those users that are using those PIM, personal information management features that Office provides, how Moodle can extend into that as well. In addition to that, we did touch on the OneDrive repository earlier. So I've picture up here of the Moodle file picker. So you should already be familiar with this file picker, but as you notice, I have a OneDrive for Business link that will appear on the left side of the file picker. So once the integration is completed, because the users are already logged in with their Office 365 credentials, we already then have access to that file pick. We already have access to that OneDrive repository for them. So when they click on that OneDrive for Business, they'll instantly see all the files they have stored on Office 365 and can use them naturally within Moodle. So this could be a huge time savings for users without having to manually maybe save that file and re-upload it into Moodle. It's just one click. It's seamless. It's very easy to use. So I think your users will find this to be very beneficial if they are storing their files in OneDrive. And if they're not, this might be a good opportunity to bring this feature to their attention so that they can basically save their files in the cloud if they're not already doing so. In addition to that, we did talk briefly about the OneNote assignment. So traditionally, a user will go ahead and set up an assignment in Moodle as a teacher, add a new activity, the assignment module. And once they go ahead and set that assignment module up, you should also be familiar with the submission types, whether or not this is going to be a file submission, an online text assignment, and then vice versa, what feedback types will you be providing as well. So once we have the integration completed, you'll have a new feature in there called OneNote submissions that lets Moodle know that this type of assignment is going to be coming through OneNote. So you'll just tick off the boxes for a OneNote submission. Once you have that OneNote submission turned on, you'll get to a screen, or your users will get to a screen that will look similar to this. There'll be a OneNote button called Work on This that they'll actually click on. So once you click on that Work on This button, that will go ahead and trigger a single sign-on in Office 365, which will then create a new page in the user's notebook for them to actually complete the assignment. Moodle will go ahead and auto-populate the topic, the title of the note, so that way the user just goes to have to finish completing typing in the note. And of course, OneNote Online automatically saves all changes. So once they're done with their note, because it's automatically saved in OneNote, it'll automatically be linked back in Moodle. So then once the OneNote is completed, the user can go ahead and complete the submission. The OneNote submission will then show up on the assignment screen for the teacher. If there's any attachments, they can still do that as well. If you've selected that this is a file attachment to be included as well, they'll go ahead and submit that, and then the teacher will then vice versa get a link in their gradebook. So this is a view of a teacher grading a OneNote submission. So they'll see that their student has provided a OneNote submission, and it's a single click for them too to go ahead and view that submission, to go ahead and see what the student has entered. Once the student has gone ahead and entered that, you still have the option to provide feedback. So I would just scroll down on that page and then create an add feedback link at the bottom. And then as the instructor, just as the student clicks their link to work on the assignment, as an instructor, I'll click on the add feedback link, which will then create a page in my notebook, which will be shared with the student as well, for them to go ahead and view what feedback I provide. So in this example, in this student's notebook, I still have their submission on the left-hand side, their new assignment, and of course these pages are automatically created and linked to once the user clicks that link in the assignment. So they'll go ahead and create their submission link, and then Moodle will automatically create the feedback link, and then I can alternate inside of OneNote Online whether I'm looking at the submission or the feedback, but those are two separate pages in the OneNote. Those are the main 4 features of the Office integration. So I want to turn the page over slightly to the Smart Start of how the Smart Start process should will look like. Each Smart Start is going to be customized based off of what each organization needs, but typically the Smart Start's typically broken into about 6 topics. So I went quickly over most of the items briefly as to what the integration looks like. So we'll talk about what the Office features are. As part of that Smart Start, we already have an Office site set up, so we'll go ahead and take you through that, let you log in, play with some of those features, get your hands on it, make sure this is a great fit for you. There may also be some features that your organization may not be set up for. Like, for example, you may not have your users using OneNote yet, or you may not have your users set up to use that calendar feature in Outlook. So we may want to do, as part of that Office features demonstration, a needs assessment and evaluation. So if there is a feature that you're not using, we may want to omit that feature or not enable it. As you know, Moodle is very modular, so if we choose not to integrate OneNote, we just won't enable that OneNote submission plugin, so it won't show up in your assignment. So part of that Smart Start will be a needs assessment to figure out what features your university or organization can use and what features we may want to leave off. For those customers that are hosted with Remote Learner, ideally we would want to begin with configuring your Moodle sandbox with those Office features. So we'll get it at that point, get an idea once we know what we're going to turn on. Set up that sandbox so you can then see those features in action for your organization. If you do have documentation that's important to your users, by using your Moodle sandbox might be a great way to get that documentation written or take screenshots, since it will already have your theme and your data in it, so you'll be able to get that look and feel. Additionally, once we have that sandbox up, that'll be a great opportunity to test the features that you'll be releasing to your users at some point. So that way we'll test that single sign-on, make sure you get the rhythm and flow that you would like, if we need to adjust any verbiage, and so get that mock single sign-on up and running in your environment via your sandbox, so that you can get it as close as possible to production before going into production, which is always a great idea. Lastly, once we have that Moodle sandbox up and running and those features tested, we'll want to go ahead and schedule a time to go ahead and set it up in production. We may want to deploy this all at once or deploy it in phases. Maybe we just deploy the single sign-on at first and you just have some simple users. We can definitely negotiate exactly how it would best be safely to roll this out to your organization when you're ready, or the features that you want to turn on at the conclusion of your Smart Start. In addition, we're really excited to the work we've done to get this integration up and running, and we definitely want to hear from you. So definitely we do have a survey that we'll want to pass out at the end of your Smart Start to get some feedback as to which new features you'd like to see in Moodle, or any features you'd like to have adjusted. So definitely during the Smart Start process, we'll always be looking for feedback as to how we can more smoothly integrate this with your environment, so it's a better fit for your users without adding any additional complexity or confusion. So definitely I look forward to getting this deployed for you guys. So I just want to take a few minutes and kind of do a small overview of what to expect in the Smart Start and what the plugin actually does. So I'm going to go ahead and stop here, and I think we'll switch over to our question and answer phase.
Thanks, Nick. That was great. So we have a small crowd. I think we should be able to turn on the microphones and ask our questions. So I'm just going to go ahead and turn on our microphones. Yeah. So if you have some questions, as soon as you see you've got the ability, go ahead and ask questions. Okay, anybody have any questions? I think we're all... Please go ahead.
Okay, Don, currently we're using LDAP authentication for our users for sign-on. And one of the things that we run into is in trying to decide whether to allow LDAP to create the user accounts, or we put them in and it's just synced with LDAP. We chose not to have LDAP create the accounts because it would cause a problem with enrollment. Will we still have that option when we do the sign-on, single sign-on with using Azure?
I'm sorry. Seems like we're still on speaker. One of the users may have the speaker turned on. If you're not speaking, feel free to mute your mic. Back to Mary's question. I'm sorry, I only got bits and pieces of it. Could you say that one more time, please?
Yes, currently we use LDAP to authenticate and manage sign-on. When we were originally trying to make the decision whether or not to allow LDAP to create the account, or we put the accounts in and it's just sync with LDAP, we chose to do that because it would cause problems with enrollment. Will we still have that same option once we do the single sign-on with Azure?
It would still work both ways. Azure, the plugin, would have the ability to create accounts in Moodle if you choose to. You could create the accounts in Moodle and then link them to Azure later by switching the authentication method. So just as you would switch it from manual to LDAP, we'd be switching it from manual to OpenID Connect, which is the plugin that provides that functionality. But I would comment that after that, there would be a process that would need to take place to reconcile everyone's Moodle accounts to their Office 365 accounts so that there is a match to connect the other functionality as well.
Okay. And would we do this, when we went from manual accounts to LDAP, we were able through Data Hub to easily update existing users to change the authentication method. I'm assuming the same will be true this time?
Yes, you could, because Moodle's modular. The laws of physics are still the same in Moodle, so we could refresh or update those accounts to then point to Azure. My only concern is just as when you're pointing to LDAP, you'll need to make sure those credentials are the same in Azure as well, so that we don't get a mismatch.
Okay. And one other question, and I think that's all my questions at this time. If we choose to use the Office 365 calendar, does that replace the Moodle calendar?
No, all it's doing is synchronizing between the two. So anything that's on a Moodle calendar
Okay.
would then get copied over to a user's Office calendar as well. But anything on a user's Office calendar does not come back into Moodle. That does not happen. So it's just
Okay.
information from Moodle to Outlook.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Nick, I do have a question that has been typed in. Is there a way to integrate Moodle into two separate Office 365 tenants, staff and student tenants or something?
Integrate Office into two separate tenants. That would be something we would want to set up in the sandbox to work correctly. So that would be something we would want to test to make sure that's the case. Because every office setup is slightly different, we'll want to test that with your exact Azure implementation to make sure that works.
Yeah, any other questions?
Hi, yes, I just have a quick question about submitting assignments through OneDrive for Business.
What is your question?
So if a student submits an assignment through OneDrive for Business and then they go through and they delete the assignment before the instructor has a chance to grade it, does it copy an assignment over or is it linked dynamically to it? Like if an instructor doesn't look at it until after the due date, do they have time to adjust it or change it?
Yeah, it is being, I'll double check this, but it is being copied over to Moodle at that point. So we're just getting, they're just using it, so it's, I would think of it as the browse list of users when you are, I'm sorry, browse list of users. I think of it as when you're uploading the file, Moodle's then copying the file over. So basically we are, and I'll double check this, copying the file from the OneDrive for Business into Moodle, but we're just providing that link so they don't have to fish for the file on their local machine.
Okay.
But that file picker is just helping the user find that file.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
All right, here's, this probably is Ralph. I don't know. I don't know which one it is.
Sounds like we may have a user on the phone.
I think that we've got another question from Betty Cheek. Would you repeat the part about using two calendars?
I'm sorry, using two calendars.
I
Can
believe
you elaborate a little bit further?
Well, it's a written-in question from Betty. Betty, do you mind chiming in?
To elaborate a little bit more on the calendar feature, as part of the integration, there is I would call it an Office 365 control panel that a user would have access to. And as part of that control panel, we'll take them into their calendar functions. The control they have over that is the Office 365 control panel in Moodle will then show a list of all the calendars they have access to in Moodle, and then they would check off on that list which calendars in Moodle they then want synchronized to Office. So do they want the site calendar? Do they want their biology course? Do they want their English course? Basically a list of all their courses by default also include a calendar, so they would check off which actual courses that they participate in that they then want those calendars to then be copied over. So you can cherry pick the actual calendars you want to use at that point. Betty, does that answer your question?
And she did follow up. If we already use Office 365 Calendar, will they sync?
If you already use Office 365 Calendar, they will sync, but you will need to let Moodle know which calendars you want to be synchronized to Office. That part does not happen automatically. Moodle will need to know which calendars you want that information sent to.
I've got another question from Joe James. She received notice today about the move to Moodle 3.03 for the North Carolina Community College system. Should we hold off on this move until after this project is completed?
I'd probably recommend if you want to have those Office plugins installed as part of your move to 303. It could be done at both times. Just getting those plugins in. Those plugins don't have to necessarily be turned on, but at least if they're in your Moodle site, they could be implemented later without downtime. So we can, as part of the Smart Start, kind of feel out at which point which features of Office you would like to include, either as part of that upgrade or at a later date. But it could be done as part of your Moodle sandbox, your move to 303, to have those plugins at least installed, even if they're not configured yet, for future functionality.
Okay. From Eric Sheffer, we are currently implementing a campus-wide SSO using CAS. What, if any, considerations do we need to take into account?
So it sounds like you're going to be using an authentication method other than Azure. So in that case, probably one thing we'd want to take into account is how we're going to match those Moodle user IDs to those Azure account IDs. So how exactly are we matching them up via email address? Are we looking at a username? What unique identifier, so that when we look at that user's information in Azure, that we can make sure we're associating them to the right account in Moodle. So as far as the, you can still welcome to use that campus-wide CAS system, but we would want to make sure we have some unique identifier that exists in both Moodle and in Azure, so that when we compare apples to apples, we can match up your users so that the right users get to the right calendar, so on and so forth.
All right, Eric, does that answer your question? Got another question, Nick. Yep, very good, Nick. It answered Eric's question. I've got a question from Victoria Tilton. From our understanding, Azure AD free is included in our Office 365 tenant. Is that all we need, or do we need the higher Azure AD versions?
That should be all you need. Microsoft is generous there. I believe the only particular features we'll be using is adding a custom application to your Azure. So I believe Azure has a limit of how many applications you can add. In this situation, we'll be adding two, one for your production and one for your sandbox. So we'll want to, so the part of the Azure implementation that we'll be using is that fine print where developer integrated applications come into play. So we'll be using two at that point, one for your production and one for your middle sandbox, since those are considered two different applications in Azure.
Thank you very much, Nick. And that answers the question. Do we have any other questions? Joe James is asking, what is the next step? Joe, basically, isothermal is in queue, so the next step will be one of our technicians reaching out to you to go ahead and start scheduling the actual integration. I believe Vanessa could probably answer that question.
Yep, you'll get an email from us. So if you're good to go, we'll send out an email asking for the next time that your team is available with the integration, we would like to see kind of a Moodle admin and an Azure admin. If they're the same person, that's great. If we can maybe just get Azure admin access, that would work with one, two. So we set up a meeting, a session, the first session with whoever and how many people you want, and we're off to the races. You'll see a more detailed orientations, presentations similar to what Nick did, but a little bit more details, and we'll address more questions that you have, and we'll start looking at exactly how you want this set up during the first session. So if you're good to go, we can get an email out to you today.
Nick, Vanessa, she says she's good to go. Nick, if
You'll get an email today.
If you could, the Azure AD free question, could you repeat your answer to that? And also on top of that, will this integration work with the free Office 365 education?
Sure. Yes, it will. You should be okay with the Azure free version. Does it work with Office 365 for education? There are, let me clarify that a little bit. If users are getting their Office subscription via an EDU address, so they're going into Office, they're going into Office says, hey, are you a EDU school? They put in their email address, then Office sends them a link to their .edu, and I believe Office allows up to 5 licenses or for that individual user. This integration wouldn't necessarily work with that. This would be more if the school is providing these Office services. Basically, everyone's basically getting that batch Office 365. So everyone in your organization, they're added to Azure, and then someone's uploading those accounts, picking those licenses, so on and so forth. If a user has a personally owned license that's unmanaged, there is a Microsoft tier that would work where they could integrate it with OneNote, but that's about it. But I wouldn't necessarily recommend enabling it for just those users, because you could kind of have a half, some users have OneNote's accounts, some users don't. So I'd only recommend this if you're basically providing Office 365 accounts to all of your users, so that way it's consistent across the board, not users that are bringing their own personal licenses or registering their licenses separately with Microsoft, because we could get into some users have it, some users don't. So this would be something you would want to roll out to all your users, provided you're also providing all your users with Office 365 accounts, so that way there's equilibrium across the board.
Jason, does that answer your question? Okay, it does. Thank you, Nick. Do we have any other questions? Okay, going once, going twice. Okay, well, I hope this has been informative for you, and I would like to really thank Nick and Vanessa for taking time out of their day to come and answer these questions. Again, we've got 5 slots that are open, first come, first serve, for the integration. Please contact your account executive as soon as possible if you are interested. And again, this has been recorded, and we will, if you would like this, we can get this out to you, but it should end up on our Vimeo page as well in a few hours. So anyways, again, thank you very much for attending, and we'll talk to you soon. Take care.